So you want a little peek behind the curtain of how things go around these parts with Greg before the show on Tuesday. So yesterday at 4:15, Greg sends me the note. I think I want to talk about Sherwood setting the hits record. And then the new Canadian TV deal drops. So we're going to get into that with Greg, who's going to stop by here in about 5 minutes' time. And we'll get into Sherwood too. We'll talk about hits. Maybe you've heard me beefing about hits now and how they're calculated and what I think of hit stats. And I am still curious. I'm curious about a couple of things, and this might be semantics, but I'm curious when we stopped calling goaltenders goalers and started calling them goalies. There's still a few old-timers that still call them goalers. Cliff Fletcher, I'm looking your direction. And when we stopped calling them body checks and started calling them hits. And how the proper way, I'm going to get very Pacific here, as we say in the Atlantic, the proper way to calculate a hit or body check stat is something along the lines of physical contact with a puck carrier that forces a change of possession. Just think about how many games you've watched and how many times you've seen someone throw a body check or a hit, whatever you want to call it. The puck still squirts away, player still makes a pass, puck still advances, same team keeps possession, but the player that threw the body check gets a checked box for a hit. Essentially what I'm saying is, I don't know, man. I look at hit stats with a grain of salt and go, okay, how many of all of these hits that we're seeing now, whether it's Kiefer Sherwood, whether it's Jeremy Lauzon, any of these, the big hitters around the NHL, how many of the hits? Zach, you need to have this information handy. Get on screen right now. I demand that you know this. How many of those hits, and right now, we should point out that Kiefer Sherwood is at 424. Okay? How many do you think force a change of possession? I have no idea.
I don't think we have that number.
I don't think we do either. I'm sure somebody does. I'm sure somebody from a team that's, watching or listening right now is going to spit that back at me at some point. But honestly, how many of those hits do you think, by the classic definition of what a hit is, and that is physical contact that forces a change of possession, how many of them actually do you think change possession?
Yeah. The one thing I think is funny too, I talk about it a lot on the post-game show that I do. When people bring up, that guy's Mitch Marner, Nylander, so-and-so, they're never going to kill that guy. They're never going to send the guy through the glass. The point of the body check, hitting, whatever you want to call it, separate the man from the puck. That was what I always learned when I was growing up playing. I was also a smaller guy, smaller player. Separate the man from the puck. That's the goal.
And somewhere along the way, hitting became a tactic, right? And it stopped becoming a way to get the puck, and it started to become something we keep hearing in the playoffs. Keep hitting them, keep hitting them, keep hitting them, more of attrition. What you do in the first will show up in the third. Somewhere along the way, it all changed, and hitting became a thing as opposed to a body check that got you. It's funny, you go back and look at old games. And by old, I mean 70s. Or even into the 80s, I suppose, as well. Right now, back then, it was puck first, man second. Now, it's take the body, and if you get the puck, well, that's great too. That's just a bonus if you get the puck. But anyway, we're going on a tangent here. We're going to talk about the hitting thing. We're also going to talk about the new Canadian TV deal, the 12-year deal for $11 billion. I think this is most fascinating, and we'll get into this with Greg here in a couple of seconds. I think this is most fascinating, not necessarily for what's going to happen to the Canadian television landscape here, but I think it's a sort of fascinating peek into what's happening with the National Hockey League, and specifically the commissioner, Gary Bettman. Going to get into that in a couple of seconds. But first...
Also, Jeff, quickly, yes? That was $7.7 billion US, right? And then 11 billion Canadian.
Yeah, 11 billion Canadian, 7.7 US.
Yeah.
What, did I get that one wrong?
No, you said it. You said it. I just wanted to
make sure. The Auditor General here on the program.
I want to make sure.
The sheet ombudsman, Zach Phillips. Any comments, any queries, any questions, any issues, please
No.
make them out to one Zach Phillips Esquire. All right, here we got coming up on the program today. It's going to be a fun one. We got a lot to get into, and a lot of it's going to revolve around media. Daily Outline presented and powered by FanDuel. Our friends and presenters make every moment more with North America's #1 sports book. And coming up on the program today, we have no shortage of things to go over. There are a number of games tonight with some significant consequences, but the main topic we're going to talk about today, the NHL television deal in Canada. If you thought the last one was a whopper, brace yourselves. This one is even bigger and perhaps more interesting as well. We'll talk about all this with Greg Wyshynski, our good friend from ESPN, because it's Tuesday, folks, and Greg's here every Tuesday. So Greg is standing by. We're going to get to Greg here in a couple of seconds. Also on the program today, what do we have aboard? NCAA debuts. How cool was that, watching Ovechkin drop in on the bar yesterday with Ryan Leonard? Ryan Leonard makes his NHL debut tonight. Jimmy Snuggerud makes his debut tonight for the St. Louis Blues. We'll talk about hits leaders and hit stats, and maybe we'll squeeze in a hit story or two. I can't resist telling the Dan McGillis story because it is just too juicy. And if we have time today, one of our favorite things to do around these parts, certainly when Greg is here on Tuesdays, are NHL Awards. And that's what we have on the table for you today. And we'll kick it all off with our good friend Greg Wyshynski from ESPN. Wish, how are you? And what did you think when you saw the massive deal, 12 years, $11 billion, 7.7 US? How long did it take you before you to pick your jaw up off the ground? None of this, by the way, is confirmed by either side. This is courtesy of our friends at Sportico. We should mention that.
And the Associated Press had the details too. I mean, obviously, my first thought was, how does this affect Kiefer Sherwood's hits record?
Hang on, pause 1 second, because your audio sounds a little tinny.
Oh,
so we're gonna hit you on pause for 1 sec, Wish. We're gonna get the clear, lush, rich, dulcet, old CBS war correspondent voice here of Greg Wyshynski. Do we have you back? You doing any better yet?
Is that better?
Oh, Greg. Oh, the sweet spot of the bat. Oh, that's just beauty. That's
good. I think the problem is that it goes through the AirPods sometimes. My point is this.
Yeah.
I made a joke about something about the hits record. I won't make it again. When I first heard about it, I was shocked because we have so many insiders and there was no indication that this was going to happen. And then I realized, that's because most of the insiders are also getting paid by major broadcasting corporations in Canada, and therefore they can't even talk about this stuff if they wanted to, which is why it's on the down.
So where were our American counterparts then? Where were you, USA? Where was everybody on the USA side of things to break this story? Well, I guess it was Sportico.
We were not on the when will the Canadian rights deal get done beat. But I should say though we should be because it's a massive deal for hockey related revenue. It's a canary in a coal mine for what the next U.S. rights deal could look like. And let's face it, the way that hockey is covered in Canada and who is paying to cover hockey in Canada greatly influences and shapes the perceptions of hockey in and out of Canada. So, I mean, the fact that Rogers re-ups on this massive deal is interesting on several levels, none the least being that their brand of coverage will now be how hockey is presented the majority of the time in Canada, although I think you and I will discuss very shortly how it will not just be Rogers covering the sport.
I would suspect that part of this would be sold off, whether it's to TSN, whether it's to Amazon. Like I don't think this is going to be an exclusive. This is going to be one company owning all of it and presenting all of these games. When I first saw the number yesterday and some of the aspects of the deal started to leak out, I'm not sure about your brain, but the first thing that I thought about is, okay, so what are some of the things that Rogers absolutely covets, and like there's no way they're gonna budge off them. Like what are the main drivers for hockey in Canada? And the big one is Saturday nights, and the other one is playoffs. And those are the two that I look at and I say, okay, those two For sure. And again, this is all I should make this up front because that used to be my employer. I am just throwing darts here and guessing at a lot of this, like a lot of us are. But I'm guessing like, okay, so what are the sacred cows here? Saturday nights and playoffs. And I would imagine some tentpole events as well. What did you think?
Well, I just appreciate you putting that out there so people don't think that your key card still gets you into the Rogers Cafe.
My fob doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, the fob doesn't work anymore. You're not elbowing up next to the Rogers exec getting the scoop on the old media deal.
Yeah, so I got the 411 on this one here. Want to slide it over to you?
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, and I should say that obviously I work for ESPN, which is Disney, which holds half of the U.S. media deal. I am not speaking from a position of any more knowledge than you are. Insofar as just what's been said, what's been reported, and our own insights. So I am wondering why none of the coverage of this deal specified that Rogers has the exclusive rights in Canada, because none of them did. They all talked about the years. They all talked about the money. Yeah. The assumption is that Rogers has it, and then we'll sell off part of their deal to say Amazon Canada.
Yeah,
but I didn't see anything written that said that Rogers has it on lock. And if that's not the case,
if that's not the case,
maybe,
then we got it.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. If that's not the case, then obviously you're thinking that the NHL then cuts a separate deal with Amazon Canada. Every single person I've talked to in the last year, ever since Amazon Canada started get into it with the documentary stuff, and then obviously with game coverage and buying, part of the Rogers package in the last, I guess, couple of years, and creating their own studio show and now creating their own personality. It's like, obviously everyone believes that they're going to be part of hockey coverage in Canada going forward, as far as presentation of live games. The assumption is, when you look at the amount of money Rogers spent on this deal, that they will then be the one who then sells off chunks of it to Amazon Canada, maybe even to TSN. But the fact that it was not specified in any of the reporting that would be the thing that happens, knowing what the NHL has been kind of saying behind the scenes insofar as the size of their next rights deals, this doesn't quite clear the bar. And so the idea that there's another component to it wouldn't be too outlandish. You know what I mean? So I think that the logic is Rogers pays out the ass for this thing, and then they sell off a chunk of it to Amazon, and that's how they recoup the incredible outlay of money that they just made for these rights. But I didn't see any reporting that would indicate that it is exclusive to Rogers quite yet.
Nor did I. That is an assumption that I'm making, and I think many of us are making here. We'll see what other shoes drop in this process. Let me take this down a different road, because the one thing that I wondered about, like there's a few boxes here that I think NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman wants to check before he calls it a career. Right? Like right now, it's like, okay, so now it's time to write the legacy.
Can we pause on that for a second?
Sure.
When you say calls it a career,
yeah,
what are we talking about? Are we talking about Gary going to the beach? Let me put this theory out there, because I firmly believe this theory.
Okay.
Is that Bill Daly takes over and Gary Bettman moves up into some sort of commissioner emeritus above him. That's what I think when Bettman retires, I don't think he's gone. I think he hangs around.
Sure, but
at least in the transition years, I don't think when he leaves, he goes to the beach.
I can see that. Okay, that I understand. So here's what I believe about this one. I think that I should have phrased it the title of commissioner.
Sure.
How about that? The title of before he relinquishes the title of commissioner. There's a few things that he wants done. And I don't think that, considering how much of a whopper this was and how much this was done suddenly is a coincidence. And I don't think that the fact that we're seeing the NHL talking openly about this being a peacetime CBA, and this is going to be one that's going to happen quickly and easily and pain-free, unlike some of the other CBA negotiations that we've all been part of. Like, I think there's a few boxes here that the commissioner wants to check before he relinquishes the title, to satisfy my friend Greg, relinquishes the title of commissioner of the NHL. There's a Canadian TV rights, there's a CBA, and there's a next wave of expansion. to me, those are the three. And then at that point, hands it off to Bill Daly, deputy commissioner, to be the peacetime commissioner.
Right.
And Gary can go about his days helping the new commissioner, and I would imagine too, trying to maybe help Bill Daly get to the Hockey Hall of Fame. I don't know. But I think that there would be things like that on the horizon for the commissioner. And once he's checked all of these boxes, the ex-commissioner of the NHL, and then his legacy is written. And I looked at yesterday and I said, okay, well, there's one box checked. There's one of the three checked.
It's only written if they do the thing that they should have done years ago, which is change the name of the award to the Commissioner's Trophy. We don't have presidents anymore. What are we doing? Let's see the Commissioner's
NHLPA doesn't even have a president anymore.
That's right, exactly. We've got no presidents.
Nobody's got presidents. Trevor Linden was the last president. Trevor Linden was the last president of the PA.
When we talk about archaic names for things in the National Hockey League, the President's Trophy is a number one, top of the heap. And by the way, maybe if you name it the Commissioner's Trophy, we get rid of the curse. Maybe it won't be cursed anymore. Maybe it's about presidents. That's why it's cursed.
People can actually touch the thing.
So you're saying to me that you think this is a peacetime negotiation? What tipped you off when the NHL told players how much they'll make in 3 years? And maybe if you keep your trap shut, we'll all be fat and happy like we've been for the last few seasons. You think that was the first indication that maybe they don't think there's going to be much pushback from the players on this CBA?
Yeah. We're doing great. Everyone just sit down, be quiet, don't say a thing. Keep your head down.
Don't look at the NBA and how much they're making.
Keep your seatbelt on. Keep your seatbelt on. Don't worry. At the end of it, there's going to be a nice little present underneath your tree. Everyone's going to be fine.
Don't pay attention to how the entire middle class of guys under the cap are being squeezed out because you've got rookies making peanuts and the top line players.
But that's the hang on. But that's the nature of the salary cap, though.
Of the salary cap, exactly.
This is the nature of this.
Grow a spine and fight the cap.
This salary cap, that deal, that listen, I'm with you on that one, but that ship has sailed.
Sailed. It's gone. I know.
Players don't.
That ship has sailed and ping-ponged off of icebergs like a pinball. Is how far that ship has gone now.
Yeah, the players, as we've seen, have no real appetite and didn't have any real appetite, as we found out, to really fight. They didn't. They did not at all. And then, making it worse, not to relitigate 2005, they caved at the worst possible time. July. No pressure point.
Yeah.
Fold. Wow.
It's kind of amazing to think that we have so many fans that have come to this game. Many of them might be watching the show right now that don't know what 2004, 2005 was and the fight that went on and that pivot point for where the league is now to be cutting these media deals and where the cap has gone and all and having a cap to begin with. It's an interesting time to think back to. A couple things about this media deal. I highly recommend people go to Awful Announcing after the show is done and read Andrew Buchholz's piece about this media deal. There hasn't been a lot of really good in-depth reporting and insight and analysis about this deal in print. And I thought that Andrew really hit on some very interesting stuff because he's been on this media rights thing for over a decade. In fact, I've known him back in the Blogs with Balls conference days. There was a thing called Blogs with Balls.
I remember that. Wow.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that since the MvsW days. Wow.
Dude, I was a panelist
Wow.
on a couple of them. They would hold them at different places. Vegas, Toronto was one.
Yeah.
Met my wife in Toronto, actually, at the Blogs with Balls. And I remember me and Andrew were at a bar after one of the conference days. And there's a guy who portrays Captain Morgan, the spiced rum guy.
Yeah. The foot up guy.
Who goes to parties. And he came over with like samples of Captain Morgan for us. And he goes, move over. And so I kind of scoot my way over on the seat. And it was just so he could put his leg up and do the Captain Morgan pose before he could give us the free booze.
I can't.
Anyways.
Listen, as someone that's like gone to the gym his whole life, I can't look at that Captain Morgan pose and not think of that guy at the gym in the change room. The guy that does that. It's just like the last turkey at the shop. Just like, buddy.
Yeah, and it's just like a grandfather clock. It's just the pendulum is swinging back and forth.
Bud, come on.
So Buchholz wrote that the 2013 deal between Rogers and the NHL. 5.2 billion Canadian over 12 years, right? So if you take the exchange rate in December 2012, that was worth 4.9 billion US. And then if you take it to 2019, because of the exchange rate, it's 3.9 billion US. So the new agreement, according to Buchholz, doubles the Canadian dollar value from the 2013 deal, but it's only 1.75 times as much in US dollars per year based on the current exchange rate. So obviously there's going to be some fluctuation there, but I've seen it cited kind of like as gospel that the NHL doubled their rights deal with Rogers. And if you parse out the numbers and go by the exchange rate as Andrew did, maybe it's not as much as that. It's like 1.57. The other thing that I found really interesting in his reporting too. So you know how like players' cap hits are different than their salaries, Marek?
Yeah,
you know how like the cap hit is one number, and then you look through the years and you get to the final year of the contract. And oh, by the way, his salary in some cases is higher than the average annual value. Well, according to Awful Announcing, the Rogers deal with the NHL, you may or may not know this, it was backloaded. So while this might seem like a gigantic leap from the value that the overall 12-year deal had that they had signed with Rogers back in 2013, if you base it off of what the final years of that deal was, it may not be the Herculean leap forward that it looks like.
I think it was the last 2 years that really ballooned.
Yeah,
from the original deal.
Yeah, and not coincidentally, also the time when they sold off their rights to Amazon. Let's be honest, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. So listen, well, like one of the things, I have an interesting conversation with someone this morning about this, about what this is going to mean for the marketplace. And the person I was talking to brought up an interesting point. And listen, I recognize that I work for an independent here. So maybe take that with a grain of salt. But this person I was talking to said, this is great for independents. Like there is always a sort of, there's that, two sides of every coin. There will be like, whenever there's like a really strong mainstream presence, there is always, maybe backlash is the wrong term for it, but there is the need for something that is opposite from that creates this sort of balance in the marketplace. And this person said to me, like, look at this as actually a good deal for independents, because there will be a need more so than ever for a stronger independent voice of hockey in Canada. That this isn't one of those like, oh boy, okay, so a major corporate entity owns all of this now and they're going to piece it off to all their buddies. This person said, like, don't look at it that way. This is opportunity for independents here to present an alternative. And that's went as far as to say the worst thing that you guys could do is try to be the light version of one of them. Don't do that. Do the exact opposite.
That's the interesting part about it. So like when I was writing about this on social media last night, the prevailing reaction was not about the years, and it wasn't about the money, and it wasn't about wondering about, the TSN part of it or the Amazon part of it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to respond to this because you know everybody there. It was palpable frustration and in some cases depression that Rogers was going to have the rights for another dozen years. Like, there are people that do not like the way they present the National Hockey League. And I think that was underscored by the juxtaposition with the way that Amazon covered the National Hockey League, with their whip around show, with the tone of the coverage, with the new faces that they had in some cases covering the game. It did present that alternative, I think, to the way that the NHL was covered under Rogers, that people were searching out, and the juxtaposition impacted it. Now, I will say that, here in the US, obviously, it's us at ESPN and it's Turner with TNT. And I feel the same juxtaposition. There are people that really like what we do and don't like them. There are people that really like what they do and don't like us by virtue of the existence of the other. I've always kind of thought of it. I value the TNT part of it because I think that their approach to coverage is in many ways diametrically opposed to ours. Their studio show goes on for a very long time, and the tone and tenor of it with Biz and Anson and them is different than what we do. And it's a hang, right? So like, I enjoy the fact that maybe our game presentation is different than theirs, and maybe their studio show is different than ours, and I feel like different strokes for different folks, but I love the idea of it being covered in different ways. So,
so
as much as I respect the people in Canada that are really kind of pissed off that Rogers is doing this for another dozen years, I hope that, like you said, it does lead to Amazon, TSN, whomever, presenting the game in a different way because they don't want to be Rogers.
Don't forget. So here's the thing. I would come up short of, and you're right. Like I know, like there are some very good people over there that I still very much miss working with.
And the others?
There's plenty of great people over there. I'm not going to get into it. Here's the thing. I don't think we should make the assumption that with the new deal, the presentation is going to be exactly the same. I mean, you look what happened when Rogers got the national rights deal, the original 12-year package, how they changed a lot of everything. And it was almost more of like an Olympic-style presentation. I mean, this is Scott Moore, who did like a number of Olympics, for example, for CBC, and he wanted that vibe. New themes and big sets and big there was a lot of, and there were things that there was different, and there were new faces and there were new hosts. It might have been too much all at once instead of being graduated in, but nonetheless, they tried new things. I would hope that with a deal like this, that they would look at it and say, okay, the tastes of hockey fans over the last 12 years has changed. We need to change along with it to reflect how these people want to consume their hockey. I would assume those conversations would be going on. I don't think, like, for those that may not have been big fans of it, I would assume that with a deal like this, you would want to present something that's not just the same thing that you've presented for the last 12 years. I just think that's natural. You have a new car to drive here all of a sudden.
It's always what it feels changing. Like when when the last rights deal was signed, Kevin Bieksa was still playing, wasn't he? Like,
yeah,
you never know who's coming down the pike, and all of a sudden someone like him shows up, and it shifts the paradigm of your coverage.
Dude, it's gonna be Seth. It's gonna be Seth Jarvis's corner by the time this whole deal is done.
Yeah, just don't ask him if he wants
Seth's
to be
corner.
GM. That clip this week.
No, that's first. That's the first question. You want to be GM yet?
Jarvis.
He's the best.
I love that kid so much.
Yeah, Seth's
I
corner.
remember talking to him before Four Nations, and I'm just like, if you make the team, like, what do you hope your role is? He's like, I don't care if they want me to play effing defense. I'll do whatever. I'll be their water boy. Who cares?
I know, right?
Part of Team Canada.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to ask you on this, because we should probably do something else on our Tuesday visit.
No, we just gaze into our navels of hockey media here for an hour. Great show, eh? You guys just talked about your lives for an hour, like anyone's interested.
The people I work with at ESPN on like a corporate level, like my friends at ESPN that are like executives, I bug the shit out of them about this. I'm just like, what do you think? Who are you? Well, like any media, not even like hockey, like any media gossip whatsoever. I'm just like such a nerd about it. So we could do like 3 hours on this, but can you maybe you can answer this, maybe you can't.
Okay.
And it's whatever you're comfortable with.
Sure.
Can you explain to me the TSN part of this? Because when you were talking about the alternate media, the TSN part of this, they are the alternate media. Like they have some rights of local teams, but they don't have the national deal. But yet they keep doing what they're doing, and they beat the living shit out of Rogers every trade deadline.
They have built such a strong hockey brand. Like, don't forget, like TSN was first to the dance with All Sports Network. I still remember when it launched, and I used to work there on Michael Landsberg's show at the old NetStar building, right at Vic Park and Shepherd, right up beside Johnny's Burgers. In the area knows exactly what I'm talking about. Right beside Johnny's Burgers, at the old NetStar building. But TSN were the first to do it, and they sort of presented the model for how you did 24/7 sports. That was the model, and then Rogers Sportsnet. I mean, it's much more complicated than I'm going to lay it out here, but TSN were essentially the first, and they presented the model for it. Right now, a lot of it was borrowed from ESPN stateside, and that's understandable because take a bow, Greg, for your company, ESPN, or the leaders, in all of it. But
the worldwide leaders,
but the worldwide leader in sports, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But the one thing where TSN always excelled, like their tentpole events were always first class. And I'll go one more. Hey, here's another one. I've never talked about this before. You know who the secret weapon for TSN has always been?
Now, Bob McKenzie. Make a guess?
Sure.
Okay, you said Bob McKenzie. I was going to say James Duthie.
Duthie is a Cadillac of announcers, right? Bob McKenzie defined the insider role in hockey in Canada. Bob. You know who one of the great creative geniuses behind all of it was, from a content point of view?
Who's that?
Steve Dryden.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I met
Steve Dryden, one of the smartest people in the history of hockey. Steve Dryden, one of the most creative people you will ever meet in any of your dealings in hockey, in the history of the game, understood what people wanted, and moreover, understood what people wanted, even if they didn't know that was it. TSN always had this sort of formula of make people comfortable by giving them 70% of what they expect and then 30% of what they don't. And it was that, like, once your viewers are comfortable with you, whether it's the set or your host or your analyst or the presentation or the way the intermissions flow, once you have them feeling comfortable, then that 30% really becomes special. If you flip that and it's 70% of just like chaos and I don't know what's going on here, and then the 30% it's not going to work. But Dryden and that entire crew, then there's a whole list of names that I could run down, understood about making people comfortable first and then telling them something they didn't know. And that's where Bob came in. Like, that's where the insider role really began to shine. And then they brought Drager in from Sportsnet and sort of and bumped that up. And now there's Pierre and there's CJ. Like, it's like a cabal of insiders because at the end of it, Wish, you know what? I mean, we're not trying to crack the atom or put anyone on the moon here. The way to get people to keep coming back is simple. Tell them something they didn't know. It's simple, right? Make them feel comfortable and tell them something they didn't know. And TSN did that great. And their game analysts were fantastic.
The other part of it, too, is tell me something I don't know from somebody I want to listen to and I enjoy listening to and want to hang out and hear more from.
Yeah.
And, not to slight anybody at Sportsnet. We've talked about it before, though. Like, there's long been a likability gap between the two networks. And, there's I guess the word is warmth, for lack of a better term.
But I was to blame for that. That was me. But that was me.
That's not you.
I made it completely unlikable.
We're not gonna.
I made it completely
autopsy. We're not doing the autopsy, and you were the least of their problems. But yeah, it always felt, even just sampling the 2 trade deadline shows every year, it just always felt like, I like 6 of the 7 tables at TSN.
You know what? You know what though? You know what this is like a totally different era of Sportsnet. This is like all pre-rights. Like, I don't even think that anybody who's there now was there then. But if you go back, like, for the longest time, the trade deadline shows specifically were almost neck and neck. And there was one thing that just killed it, is when they turned trade deadline, which is an information show that one year, into a circus. And it was a celebration. We have a big trade to announce between the Oilers and the Islanders. But first, this sideshow. And
there's
they
a llama.
But that worked though. But the thing is, that's the thing. That kind of stuff worked at TSN, right? And it was after that that there was. I remember talking to people who were there at that time. Like, this is going to set us back. This one's going to set us back. But, like, look, man, there's again, I'm going to big up my former colleagues. Like, there are so many really, really talented people that are there that I want all the best for in this new deal. And I hope that they get what they deserve, because there's some excellent people there. There really are.
And at the end, last thing I'll say too is, like, I know that people kind of judge the coverage based on the front-facing talent, which is a term that I hate, but I'm going to use it anyway. But like, there's so many. You don't realize it until you start working for one of these places. But like, there's so many people in control rooms and trucks and cameras and the amount of human tonnage that it takes to put on these broadcasts is staggering. And I think, soup to nuts, all the people that have had the rights do a hell of a job putting on games. You might not love the people talking to you between periods or talking to you during the game, and that's fine. Everybody can kind of approach the game in different ways. We all like different voices saying different things. But from a hey, let's put on a show standpoint, I think Rogers does a hell of a job. I think the product looks great. And so I hope, congrats. I mean, bottom line, this deal means people probably won't lose their jobs. Hooray. Let's go celebrate that.
I hope
all the
so.
People behind the scenes. Yeah, all the people behind the scenes. You'd hope so.
There's some great ones. And again, I do think that this does spell well for independent hockey voices in Canada. I know I'm saying that as working for an independent, but I do think that this is a good thing for the entire industry. All right. Anything else you want to do today? Or are we running out of time? Just talking about ourselves and our industry.
Let's talk about the hits thing real quick, because I bugged you about it for a specific reason.
Well, you did, and then the rights deal dropped, and all of a sudden I didn't get any more texts about the hit parade for Kiefer Sherwood.
So I wanna shout out ESPN Stats and Info, because they're the ones that led me down this path.
Okay,
that's another group at ESPN that I'm constantly bugging with my flights of fancy. So I didn't realize that he had set the single season record for hits. He has 424 in 70 games. It's more than any other player since they started tracking the stat in 2005, 2006.
Tracking it incorrectly, by the way.
His hits per game is tied basically virtually with Matt Martin from the 2012-2013 season. Okay, so that's like hits on average. But he has the raw number lead.
Yeah.
And so the question that I had about this, Marek, as two guys that have long admired the scoring being done at New York Islanders home games when it comes to players like Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin.
No. I don't know what you're talking about here, Greg Wyshynski.
The 5x multiplier that existed at Islanders home games for every hit. I said to myself,
but
what do we got here with Sherwood? Are we getting a little bit more creative accounting from our friends in Vancouver on his record? I'll tell you.
Listen, I will tell you. The Islanders are not first offender. They are not first offender. You know who the first offender was? To my knowledge, and there probably was more before.
Who?
The Oilers. And the infamous, and I love this story, the Dan McGillis trade to the Philadelphia Flyers. So the Flyers wanted to get tougher, and they wanted more of a killer back there. And this was the era. Don't forget, this was like I want to say this would have been like 97, maybe 1998. So no one's watching a million games every single night. You're reading stats. And Glenn Sather, in a stroke of genius, was knowing the Philadelphia Flyers wanted more of a bruising type back on the blue line. All of a sudden started to, let's just say, fluff up the numbers for Dan McGillis. It's like, Dan McGillis was a really good defense. It was pretty tough, but like 8, 9, 10 hits a game all of a sudden. So the Flyers think they're getting a killer. This would have been the Yanni Niinema deal. There was more pieces involved, but essentially it was Dan McGillis for Yanni Niinema, who was then involved in another interesting deal with Dallas. So the Flyers thought they were getting a killer because in the game sheet, Dan McGillis, the scorers were encouraged to add hits for Dan McGillis. They thought they were getting a killer. And they got Dan McGillis, who's a very, very nice defenceman, but he's not someone who's laying the body.
He's not Darius Kasparaitis.
No, he's not Darius Kasparaitis or Darian Hatcher or any of these guys. It's one of my so don't let's not just be quick to jump on the Islanders because they have not been the only offender. Now my question, and I asked Zach this off the top, and he promised me an answer by the end of the show. How many of those hits are actual hits? And by that I mean body contact that forces a change of possession. See, that's the hit stat that I'm interested in.
They're not.
Okay. No, of course they're not. You just hit someone, the puck goes somewhere, and you get credit for hits. Like I want to know. I want to know the hit stat. Give me the hit stat where there was contact and you got the puck because of it.
Yeah,
you've actually done something as opposed to just bang bodies.
You would think with the advent of puck and player tracking and AI that we should be able to get that stat pretty quickly at some point if they were so interested in establishing it. But here's what I want to establish.
Okay.
I have like any true scientist. I created a theory.
Scientist. Oh.
And then I've tested the theory. And my theory was that Sherwood's record is crap because somebody scoring games in Vancouver was getting him a 5x multiplier on hits. It's the new Cal Clutterbuck. How else could he achieve such a feat? And I've tested my theory from my friends at ESPN Stats and Info, and here are the numbers.
Really? Hang on. Really?
Home, at home.
Okay.
Sherwood averaged 22.7 hits per 60 minutes.
Okay.
That is the 16th highest average in a season since 2005-2006. Okay.
Yeah.
On the road, Sherwood averaged 26.3 hits per 60 minutes. So he averaged almost 3 hits per 60 more on the road than at home. This man has earned his record, Marek. He is not the byproduct of some old fuddy-dud instructed to go 5x on the hits. He earned the record on the road with more hits than he had there than at home.
Did anyone ever do any research like this on all of those Islanders players? At how many hits they got on the road versus at home?
We certainly could. The numbers are publicly available on on NHL.com. We could dive into them. If some enterprising person wanted to look at the Matt Martin numbers from when he had the record or the Cal Clutterbuck numbers from when he had the record, I'd be intrigued to see. It would really, unfortunately, put the damper on one of our favorite jokes, which is how the scorers at Nassau Coliseum basically would credit Cal Clutterbuck with a hit if he looked at a guy rather than even actually tried to hit him.
Breathed on him, sneezed on him, lined up next to him at the draw, anything. Yeah.
Yeah, if somebody wanted to be studious and look into those numbers, I will accept the results. But in this case, he earned the record. He earned the record with more hits on the road on average than he had at home.
I like it. But then again, I like Kiefer Sherwood, and I'm pretty much gonna guarantee you something. Anaheim, Nashville, how quickly I always wonder about, okay, the minute you let go of a player or a player leaves, how quickly you go back and try to replace that player. When you look at both those teams, like how many of those teams have looked and said, you know what, we could really use a Kiefer Sherwood type here.
Kiefer Sherwood type. Yeah,
both.
Exactly.
Both of those teams. Well, I seem to remember we used to, like, that guy used to be around here. You know, the guy we didn't play very much. Yeah, now that guy, like, honestly, Kiefer Sherwood is one of my favorite players in the NHL.
And look, you know, not to tie a bow around it, but I think two likable people just gave you information you didn't have before. We are basically the TSN of podcasts.
TSN. Clearly, exactly. This is TSN. We've made you comfortable, and we're delivering information. But here, you know the interesting story about Kiefer Sherwood. So he has an allergy. Like, he has a number of different, I think it's food allergies. So he has to be so specific about not just what he eats, but what he's around, that it's actually, and this is why I love Sherwood, he's changed his entire life. I shouldn't say changed. He's constructed his entire life around that. So, and coaches will always talk about how much they love this guy because he was so details oriented, because he's been that way his entire life because of these allergies. Like, you know, I think he still does. I think he wears, like, you know, surgical gloves underneath his hockey gloves. Like, that's how deep this goes.
Wow.
That this guy has been forced to be very, very specific about what he puts in his body, what he's around. His days are very precise. He does, like, you know, the same thing every day, has his routines.
Attention to detail.
Coaches absolutely adore this guy. Like this one's a home run for Vancouver. I love this guy and I love his story. He's hands down one of my favorite players. Not as much as Gabe Landeskog maybe making a comeback here. Greg Wyshynski, how'd you feel about seeing Gabe Landeskog taking some contact in Colorado practice? Greg Wyshynski. And by the way, when's the last time, if ever, we went into the playoffs and said, the two teams you don't want to face, one of them's in third and the other's in the wild card spot. And here we are in the West. Here we are in the West.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Colorado and Dallas having to play in the first round.
No, I love that. Hey, by the way, Dallas.
Hang
on, Dallas can win the division still. There is a road there. There's a path there, a good one, because Dallas' schedule is light. They have a head-to-head with Winnipeg. Winnipeg's schedule is tougher. Don't be surprised if at the end of this, because we all thought after that Vancouver win, okay, Winnipeg's tucked away now. They got the wins. They're good. Everything's fine. Dallas has a path to first. Like, wouldn't it be the most Winnipeg thing ever if at the end of all of this, Winnipeg had to play Colorado
again?
It could happen. Well, all I'm saying is it could happen.
It's kind of pick your poison, right? I mean, with the way, are we under the assumption the Blues are going to get the first wild card and end up playing Vegas in the first?
Are they ever going to lose again? Is what I'm like. How's this team going to lose? It's incredible what they're doing right now, and they just added Jimmy Snuggerud tonight.
If there was a way for Dallas to get out of that first round matchup against Colorado, then it's game on. Then I'm feeling pretty good about life again, because they probably have enough to get through a 1 versus final wild card series, waiting for Heiskanen to get healthy. Yeah. He comes back in like the second round, and then Colorado's facing a fully armed and operational battle station instead of the diminished group that is Dallas. And again, diminished group for a team that could win the division with a good run towards the end, but still you need him to beat Colorado. So that's probably the optimal thing, is like get the easiest first round matchup you can, avoid Colorado at all costs in the first round, and then you might have a little something Dallas.
All right. Only got a couple of minutes here left with you. Ryan Leonard, Alexander Ovechkin, meet in a bar, fill in the punchline, Greg Wyshynski. Listen. The legend of Ovechkin continues to grow here every day, and he's got 5 left. They're playing Boston tonight. They've got Carolina tomorrow. Then they've got Chicago. He may get the record there. Chicago's essentially called up like the whole AHL team. He gets it this week, right? I know they have the Islanders at the end of all of it. He gets it this week, right?
I think the carrot is square in front of him right now. I think he probably gets it this week. I do want to pause on Leonard though. Like, we've always heard stories about players, young players in particular, coming into locker rooms and meeting Sidney Crosby or meeting the big star, or meeting the captain, and what that's like, and adjusting what life is like once you meet that person. The person that maybe you had a poster of them on your wall. I got to imagine Ovechkin's probably like one of the most approachable of those types.
The stars?
You are meeting someone who eats a bag of Cheetos on the way to the plane. You're eating someone who drinks soda on the bench. You're eating someone who is, by all accounts, a dude. And now you're having a beer with him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's obviously an aura with Ovi. But I think it's a different kind of aura, a different kind of star power, and maybe a different kind of respect than you would normally have when you do end up meeting, one of these legendary players as we see Ovechkin in the bar.
So
I mean, like, that's
so good.
That's, to me, like, probably Ryan Leonard probably had an easier time adjusting to being Ovechkin's teammate than he would, one of the pillars of the game. Certainly than he would, being Nathan McKinnon's teammate, where he's staring at you until you put down the beer and have a Powerade instead.
But here's the thing, though. Like, I look at this. I'm glad you got us to this point. I was hoping to make it today. Like, you look at what Jimmy Snuggerud's walking into. Who's not happy in St. Louis right now? You look at what Ryan Leonard is walking into. Who's not happy in Washington? Like, Jimmy Snuggerud and Ryan Leonard are walking into two of the happiest dressing rooms in the entire NHL to play tonight. Like, this really is fantastic, I think, for both of them. To the point about meeting stars, my favorite story is Mel Engelstad told me this at Hockey Day in Canada back when we were in Winkler, because his favorite growing up was Bob Probert. And he got Probert to fight him. He essentially begged him. And it was a preseason game, and Bob was always a comment, okay, kid, I'll do it for you. And he told me, he said, Probert hit me in the face 3 times really fast, and all I could think about was, this is the coolest thing in the world. Bob Probert is punching me in the face.
Well, always when we're talking about the NCAA players, like one of my earliest, not earliest, but like one of my more prominent memories, I was covering that Colorado series where Cale Makar, dive bombed into the series.
And was so good,
a fully formed freak during the entirety of those playoffs. I still can't believe how good that kid was. I mean, I can. I mean, he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer, but like to go into that situation the way he did was still phenomenal. I noticed you left Gabe Perreault out of that. And happy to join the locker room.
Gabe Perreault gets to go to New York.
Hey JT, I'm Gabe. So,
but so here's the thing. But the team that wanted him in the draft is a team that was drafting one after New York with their would have been, was it second first round pick? Might have just been their only Nashville Predators. That was a guy that they wanted more than anybody else at that spot. Was Gabe Perreault. And the Rangers took him one before. So if you're talking about going into like a tough room right now, if you're Gabe Perreault, choosing between Nashville and New York right now,
I think Laviolette's going to give this kid a chance to shine. I think I'm excited to see what he does there. I think he's a great player. I'm like exponentially excited to see what Leonard does with the Caps. First of all, I think the world of him as a player. I think he's got a hell of a motor. He kind of plays a Capitals style anyway. And when a team doesn't make a big move at the deadline, specifically because they know that this kid's on the way, and it won't outwardly
no pressure,
it, but
no pressure.
But you and I both know that was the case. No pressure, but man, what an endorsement though! Like what an endorsement. And again, it all tracks back to look at the Capitals and what they did to surround Ovechkin with this team at a time when other teams, cough Pittsburgh, are flailing and flopping and sliding deeper into the abyss.
There's a bigger conversation there. We don't have time for it, but I do want to have the Pittsburgh conversation with you. Because I think the most important thing that everybody needs to realize about the Pittsburgh Penguins is the number 5. And that's just going to be like a little tease, but why don't we do that conversation next week? And why the number 5 is so important for understanding the Pittsburgh Penguins. So bracket that for 7 days. I'm going to come back and say, what was your buddy Jeffy saying? What did he mean when he said the most important number to attach to the Pittsburgh Penguins is the number 5?
You remember number 5. I'll remember number 4. And briefly, because I know we got to go. You wanted to talk about the Heart. We
barely have time, but go for it. Yeah,
the last awards watch before the voting, which I believe begins on April 11th, will be next week on ESPN.com.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that Draisaitl will have the lead by then amongst the actual voters. I think the goal total is incredibly impressive. I think the analytics case is there in a way that it is not there for McKinnon. I can't say here is where my vote goes because the people get upset, but I would be leaning towards Connor Hellebuck myself. I
that's where mine would go. That's where mine would go.
Everything that they do, and even if they don't win the division, everything they do tracks back to him. He gave them the foundation for everything they've done this season. The percentage of their wins that he has is phenomenal. He's got the statistic case. He's got everything going for him. He's the best goalie in the world. I think he's meant more to his team than anybody else. I think I would lean Hellebuck, but I don't think that I have a problem with anybody leaning Draisaitl right now.
I go Hellebuck. I've been pretty much on the Hellebuck train all season long. But then don't forget, like, I'm the guy that had Shesterkin for the Heart. Like, I think most seasons you can nominate a goaltender, and most seasons, a goaltender should probably win.
You see, this is the most important embodiment position. You're the living embodiment of the problem people have with us giving the Heart to a goalie, which is that they could win it every year. You're literally trying to give it to a goalie every year.
Goalie should win the Norris. Let goalies win the Norris while you're at it. Selke too. Sure, goalies should win all the awards.
That's right. That's many people are saying Dustin Wolf for Jack Adams. That's what many people are saying.
How do you know he's not whispering in Huskers' ear? How do you know that, Greg? You don't know that.
We don't know. We're not privy.
All right. Thanks to the navel gazing chat about hockey media and the brand spanking new NHL Rogers deal and everything else that followed afterwards. You have a good 7 days, and don't forget, next week we're talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins and the number
5.
How many Jacksons on the victory tour?
5.
How many fruits and 5 alive?
5.
How many Olympic rings are there? Keep going here. How many fingers on this hand? All right, Greg, we'll talk to you in 7 days about the number 5. Bye, bud. There he is, Greg Wyshynski from ESPN. Anything you want to add, by the way, Zach, to the Rogers NHL deal conversation? That kind of
no.
I mean, you're part of hockey media, bud. You're part of it now. This affects you. Yeah. It's going to change your life forever.
The first thing that I thought when it happened was that there's going to be selling off of pieces here and games. I think that
We're
was
assuming.
Assuming obviously. The initial report that came out when I saw it, I'm not kidding you. This is going to sound really dumb. It was an Alan Walsh tweet that made me see it, and I went, I got. Like, this is early April Fool's, and I had to check his account. I had to check everything to make sure it's a
But that's
real
good
report.
that you do that. That's good that you, especially
we
on
just
April
didn't
Fool's.
hear anything about it, right? Like, we didn't hear anything about it leading
shocker.
into it. This was not something talked about. I think a lot of people here in Canada specifically expected that there was going to be, like, a big negotiation that we would hear a lot about, or that Rogers would wait, or whatever, and it just never happened. It always like, boom, and deal was announced. It made me think that there's something else coming.
Yeah.
Just pieces being moved off, but I don't know. It's good for Gary.
And good for the players, and good for
the players.
hockey-related revenue. All of a sudden, like, if you're an agent out there, maybe all of a sudden, if you're Cortex and you have someone on your team, Zach, and maybe someone on the Florida Panthers.
Why do you have to do this?
Sorry. Oh, look at the time. We got to go. Sorry. I just lived the torch to you. That's all. You know this, Zach.
So rude.
You love me. Zach loves me. He loves me, loves me, loves me. All right. Let's get to our games tonight. Want to remind you. FanDuel, proud to connect fans to the major sports moments that matter to them. The sheet is powered by FanDuel, home of the same game parlay. Make every moment more on FanDuel. Did I mention that Zach loves me? Yes, he really does. All right, so we got 10 games on the board tonight on this April 1st. When's the last time you played an April Fool's joke on anybody?
I don't do the April Fool's jokes,
I don't.
so I can't think of any. My girlfriend was doing them to me all day today. It wasn't...
You bite on any
like
of them?
I come into my... Yeah, I almost lost my mind on one of them. She put tape over the sensor on my mouse, and my mouse is pretty critical to the work that I do.
But
eating lunch, I come back in here, and I'm like... Oh, what's wrong?
But you could
losing my mind.
You could do that on any day, right? Like shaving cream and
I
white
guess.
towels. Like, oh yeah. You can do that on any day. My favorite at university was always getting buckled with my friends and then going in our dorm and unscrewing the shower nozzles and putting tea bags inside and then put the nozzles back on.
It's good. It's good.
Peppermint shower in the morning. Anyhow, Washington Capitals and the Boston Bruins tonight is one of the marquee matchups this evening. Charlie Lindgren starts. Jeremy Swayman starts. Ovi is 5 goals away from the Gretzky record. Don't think he gets them all tonight. But like, this guy scores every game, man. And that Ryan Leonard guy makes his debut for the Washington Capitals. I really want to watch this Florida-Montreal game at the Bell Center. The game on Sunday was an absolute thriller. That was fantastic. Nick Suzuki, great as usual. Vitek Vanacek gets the start for the Florida Panthers. Sam Montembeault responds for the Montreal Canadiens. Buffalo and Ottawa Canadian Tire center James Reimer facing off against Linus Ullmark. No Brady Tkachuk. You go back to that Ryan Graves collision in the game against Pittsburgh Penguins. Upper body injury. He is not available to play tonight for the Ottawa Senators. Nashville Columbus. It'll be Sorokin versus Vasilevsky. Speaking of games from the weekend, what do you think Kucherov does if he's staring at an empty net tonight? Against the New York Islanders.
Yeah, I think he's going to shoot that one.
I don't. I really hope that he doesn't. It would not be Kucherov if he didn't try to do it again. I really want him not to shoot at it now. I really don't.
I hope that he doesn't as well, but I feel like how close this is, he will shoot it this time. If it were a week away or something, I think he doesn't.
I want Kucherov to be Kucherov. Yawning cage, try to force a pass. Try to force something that's not there. You're shaking your head. All right. I know John Cooper won't like it either. Detroit and St. Louis at the Enterprise Center. Jordan Binnington gets a start there. Jimmy Snuggerud, we mentioned, debuts for the St. Louis Blues this evening. Calgary facing off against Utah. I mentioned in my notes, was that the quietest 30-goal season that we've seen from someone this year? Nazem Kadri with 30 goals so far on the campaign.
Yeah,
Had a
I
really
also
good year.
I wish that I was more. I just thought about it like after the fact. It was the guys on Barn Burner, which people should check out. They actually were on the Amazon Prime broadcast. Today's Tuesday, so last night leading into
Wow.
the Flames game. But they were talking about the Kadri 30-goal campaign and how many of those goals have come in the third period.
That's
Tying
Kadri.
goals, leading
that's
goals.
him.
Like,
Think
even
about his
more
time in
impressive
Colorado,
than that.
man. Think about his time in Colorado. Third period goals, man. I'm a big fan. Edmonton faces off against Vegas tonight at T-Mobile Arena. San Jose, Anaheim, and the Winnipeg Jets face off against the Los Angeles Kings. That should be a good one. Anything else from you? Anything from the chat we should go over and pause on? Anything entertain you there? I kept looking down. There was a couple of good ones, especially when we talked about the new NHL deal. Anything pause-worthy there? Good to see Singsy in the chat. As always.
Yeah, Singzu's active. Chat was very active today. Appreciate that. Make sure everyone hits that like button. Subscribe here to the Daily Faceoff channel. But I wanted to at least throw out to people as well while you're watching this show. After you finish watching this show, watching Johnny Lazarus, Colby, and Pat Maroon debate whether or not they would like Alex Ovechkin scoring the goal against them was one of the funniest parts of my morning this morning. Because Colby and Pat basically just started absolutely ripping Laz. And it was one of the funnier things I've seen because Laz just kept trying to defend it. And normally I get where he's coming from on things and can at least kind of agree with him. There's no shot on this one today. He's saying he would like to be the guy who gets scored against. I'm like, come on, dude. No shot. The goalie that goes in there wants to be scored against by Ovi.
Do you know, like, there's only, okay, I think we talked about this on the show a while ago. There's only one goalie who I can see wanting to surrender this goal.
Yeah, an e-bug.
An e-bug. That's it.
Yeah.
Because, look, this picture's going in the Hall of Fame. I'm in the Hall of Fame. Look, I'm attached to hockey history. That's it. Nobody else. Every other goaltender in the NHL is saying, like, yeah, dude, just do it on an empty net. We like the whole goalie fraternity. Don't want to be part of it. Do it on an empty net. That's why I don't want him to do it on an empty net. I want a goalie who's going to be the guy. Who's going to be the one that surrenders it. Come on, you don't want that?
Who's the ideal goalie? Like, let's get a little bit fantasy land here. Because we can look at the games lined up. Let's just take games lined up aside.
You take all of it aside and who...
Yeah. If there's a goalie he could score against to do it, who is it that you'd like to see him score against?
It just goes back to Pittsburgh, Washington. It's Fleury.
That's what I was thinking too.
That's the one that I most closely associate Ovechkin with.
Mm-hmm. I think
probably
it would be
Fleury.
him as well. One of the Russian goalies would be one of my other answers, just because I think it would be kind of funny. Just because they're gonna have to like if it's Vasilevsky, if it's Shesterkin on the new wave. Shesterkin could be funny because he could turn around, and while everybody's pouring off the bench, they're on the ice, confetti's coming out, he's chasing them down, he's smacking his stick off the post. Like
that'd be Kochetkov.
Blow a gasket.
That'd be Kochetkov. I could see Kochetkov
Could be
doing
him
that.
too.
Yeah, I could see Kochetkov doing that. But yeah, Shesterkin, I could
Bennington, J-Rock says as well, could snap, challenges him to a fight after. Those would be funny ones. But yeah, I agree with you. It's Fleury. Fleury's the answer.
Fleury's the right one. Okay, I'm glad we got that sorted. And did we get anywhere on the hits? Or is that just mindless chatter between me and Wish?
Okay, so I searched up on ChatGPT to try to help me. Here, I'm going to read it to you because I thought this was kind of funny. How many of Kiefer Sherwood's hits this season have forced a change of possession? While precise statistics on the number of hits by Kiefer Sherwood that have directly resulted in change of possession are not publicly available, it's evident his physical play significantly contributes to the Vancouver Canucks' performance.
Yes.
His aggressive forechecking and strategic physicality often lead to turnovers, disrupting opponents' plays and creating opportunities for his team. Head coach Rick Tocchet has noted that opposing defensemen are particularly wary when retrieving the puck with Sherwood on the ice. I thought that was a good little closing line.
So, potato chip answer from ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So
I've got
when
nothing, but here's some nothing.
I don't have an answer to you, but here's a word salad to make it sound like I'm really giving this some consideration. I've done some research into this one.
I thought it was good. Yeah, basically got nowhere with that. I found the same answer doing that I did when I searched up the thing in the first place, when it was like, Rick Tocchet says he causes pressure on the forecheck, and it was like, okay, I knew that.
But yeah, like there are ways that we can like quantify this. Like, okay, so how many hits have led to turnovers?
Yeah.
ChatGPT
actually, by the way, recommended I go to game logs and determine how many forced turnovers Sherwood had in each game and try to match it with hits. It was like, no, this is for you to do, not me.
This is your job.
Yeah.
This is why we made you. We made you to do things like this. Not to direct us to other resources. We made you to do this.
Yeah.
Resistance is futile. We'll all be slaves to these things one day anyhow. So on that cheery note, cheer up, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the games tonight. This program returns tomorrow at 3 o'clock Eastern. And don't forget, as Zach mentioned, go back and watch the debate or the pile on Laz with Colby and Pat, just hammering, just peppering with rights and lefts. Our man Johnny Lazarus this morning on Morning Cup of Hockey. That show returns tomorrow at 9 o'clock Eastern. Daily Faceoff live at noon, and then our little act here at 3. Got it? Got it. Talk tomorrow. Do it all again. Have a great day. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.